Nope.
Hello, dear listeners. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, this is a continuation from the story that was uploaded last week. So if you have not heard last week's story, go ahead and check that out. I will leave a link down below, because if you don't, you will be totally confused in this one. With that said, to those of you who have heard part 1, here is part 2 of I've built a tiny house in the wilderness, but something doesn't want me there. Two nights have passed since my first frantic post crying out for help. The first night, with all your help, gave me great confidence in my ability to adjust out here. But the second night took a turn. I'm not so sure any longer. I don't have many options, and none of the ones I do have are particularly agreeable. Things that night started to calm down around 4:30 a.m., near daybreak. 4 hours of pounding, grinding, splitting noise petered out to the sound of a few squirrels doing their worst to gain entry into my home. By the time the first light crept across the forest floor, there was silence and stillness. It was all I ever wanted. And while I was not sure I would experience it again after that night, it had come. Sure as daybreak, death, and taxes. There was no time for sleep. I had a lot to accomplish today if I was going to refuse to back down and be the latest 40-something to move back home with his parents. A prospect I must avoid at all costs. I started by brewing some coffee on the wood stove. My priorities had shifted, but not enough to part with this most necessary of rituals. Next, I allowed myself an hour and a half to inspect and repair the damage that had been done to my humble abode. Whatever had torn the siding from the bottom of my exterior walls had at least left them on site. I replaced all but 2 boards that were shredded beyond viability, and patched the remaining holes with a vapor barrier to keep the moisture from seeping in. It would do for now. As I cleaned up the debris left on site, I found something exceedingly troubling behind my home. At first, I simply noticed that all of the plants and seedlings I started in my garden were missing. At least 50 plants. Garlic, onions, salad greens, potatoes, and more were gone, and my beds were now barren. There were no holes in the moist earth, indicating where they had been torn from. The soil was rich, black, and even, as if they had never been planted in the first place. In the space that my potato plants occupied, I spied a small circle of bright clean white peeking through the topsoil, and brushed the rest away to uncover an egg. A clean, white egg buried in place of my seedlings. Clearing away the other areas revealed the same in each row. One egg after another. Perfectly normal looking eggs that one would purchase at any low-end, high-volume grocer. I accidentally broke one of them during extraction. Its contents were foreign and revolting. A black and blue wrangled mess of rubbery, stringy flesh amidst a thick, streaked muck that smelled like rot and petroleum, which stung my skin. I dragged my palm across the grass, trying to remove the disgusting content before carefully gathering the remainder of the eggs for disposal, far from my property. On my way into town, I made one stop to part with them, careful not to crack any others and carry that horrific stench with me. I may be down a pill, but at least I avoided being shunned by the townsfolk for my smell. The nearest town had one single outfitter, what used to be a five and dime, now sold a strange assortment of instant meals, beer, and hunting and fishing equipment. The proprietor was no less ragged or ornery than his stock. Any openings I tried to make to converse about local legends, strange happenings, or anything else were met with pure hillbilly derision. "Just another city boy trying to figure out the ways of the world," he'd say time and again, before spitting his tobacco into a Snapple bottle that looked like it had survived a war. At least he was consistent. Until I popped a $20 bill into his dilapidated plastic tip jar. At that exact moment, his whole attitude shifted drastically, likely due to the fact that it would mean a bottle of wild turkey was now in his immediate future. "Cassandra at the library. You want to talk to her about that weird stuff." I wasn't about to push my luck, so I located the library on my own and quickly found Cassandra, which was simple since she seemed to be the only employee in a location with 0 visitors. While a bit rough around the edges, Cassandra was far more forthcoming than the attendant at the store. With nothing else to do, she sat and talked with me for an hour, even made me a cup of tea while I cautiously approached the activity I had experienced on my property. I got more comfortable as time went on, but still avoided going into any detail that would make me sound like a lunatic, which was a good portion of my experience. "Salt for protection, offerings for appeasement. Milk and honey are best," she said matter-of-factly. Right in line with some of the more helpful suggestions to my previous post, this woman validated the wisdom that appears you readers, for some reason, have. It was getting dark by the time I returned to my cabin, but the pink light of the setting sun was enough to see and manage my handiwork. As instructed, I used 2 full containers of dark blue yellow raincoat labeled salt to draw a circle around my home and my garden. I had also picked up some starter plants to reinstate my attempt at cultivation. Then I placed a small bowl of milk and honey outside the circle to the east, within sight of my front doors. The night was beautiful, calm, and moderately warm, with a sky full of stars like I have never seen, given the lack of light pollution. I sat vigil for a time, reading and having a couple glasses of wine, before tucking in and drifting off to enjoy a deep, well-earned sleep. The weather the next day was just as pristine. The wind, with its slight chill, mixed with the warmth of the sun on my skin as I inspected my circle, collected my empty bowl, and returned to explore the intricacies of my newly acquired land. It felt wonderful to return to excitement about my new home. It was even more so when I found that a couple traps I had set were tripped and I would be having rabbit for dinner. I collected my quarry, butchered them, expeditiously saving and stretching the skins, and prepared a wonderful feast. Rabbit stew with red potatoes, garlic, carrots, and fresh thyme, followed by a furtherance of wine. I still had a lot of remaining work to do in the garden, and to restore some of the damage to my home. But after my ordeal the first night, I chose to declare this day a weekend day, and simply be and enjoy. That, of course, did not prevent me from bolstering my defenses of salt and providing another offering for whatever had plagued me earlier for the evening. I was feeling more comfortable, but I was not stupid. I sat vigil again as the sun set, but moved inside, watching the woods from the comfort of my couch near the wood stove once a rather intense chill set in. I read on and off, but really I was keeping a close eye on my bowl out front. It had been empty this morning, and I wondered if I could catch any activity around it. if I remained alert. Looking up from my book, I saw the bowl begin to move, its form glowing in the growing moonlight. The book dropped from my hands as I watched it slowly rise into the air, first just an inch and then several feet. This was incredible. I couldn't make anything out in the darkness behind it, but the white bowl was clear, and it was being raised to almost 6 feet in the air. I sat forward, in a mix of excitement and trepidation, to bear witness to the phenomenon. Crash. It was shattered on the ground, milk and honey flying into the air around it. Broken pieces of porcelain and its soupy contents splayed out over my circle. Crunch. An anemic-looking bare foot was stepping on its shattered remains. My eyes adjusted, and I raised my sight up a thin blue ankle to an emaciated waist covered in black tattered clothing, to finally behold the sight of the thin man now stepping over my line and walking straight towards me. By the time my eyes had met his thin yellow pupils and translucent bald head, all rational thought had left me. He was walking towards me with slow but inevitable purpose, his eyes locked on mine as he came closer and closer. For the second time in 2 days, I flipped over the back of my couch like a cat sprung from its rest and pressed my back against the furniture. My vision went red. My head went soapy, bubbling and threatening to float away. Knock. One simple, definitive knock came from my front door. Shit. No. Shit. No. Shit. No. It was the only mantra that surfaced. Knock. Another. Then another. Every 3 seconds. My heart pounded 100 times between each knock as my mind became more and more frantic, trying to grasp some plan of action, something I could do, some way to make this stop, make this thing leave. Just leave me alone. My searching gaze landed on the rifle I had purchased, sat upright in the corner, loaded and ready. But before I could even consider leaving my minimal cover, I heard cracking sounds from beneath it, and watched in horror as several moist black roots poked up through the corner and began entwining themselves around my only weapon, enclosing it in a raged cage of brambles. I think that was the moment that I blacked out, though it's hard to tell. Asking when you lost consciousness, the very thing you require to determine such a thing, is fairly difficult. What I do know is that I woke this morning, alive, intact, somehow. The roots are gone, but the damage to the corner floor of my home remains. There was also one last remnant from the events of last night. My front door is now adorned with a crude rendition of 2 rabbits, drawn in blood, with troubling streaked X's in place of their eyes. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this week's story. If you did, you know what to do. Take that like button and set a trap for it, and then capture it, and then make a stew out of it, and then you gain its strength once you eat it, you see. It's all very common science. Shout out again to the author of this story, DM Blackwell. Again, quite the badass name, if I do say so myself. I really wish there was more to this story, but at the same time, I'm glad There isn't, because you know what I say about scary things and scary stories and horror. The less you explain, the scarier it is. And I think he left it off at a pretty good point where you fill in the blanks yourself, which is always scarier than having someone explain it to you. If you like the story, links down below to connect with them and learn more and find more of their work on their website. But until next time, everybody, remember to stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next video.